Morning I realized my relationship was already over. I was standing in the bathroom at 6:47 a.m., watching my fiancé sleep through the mirror. He was on his back, one arm over his face, phone on his chest, not on the nightstand. On his chest. I noticed that, and then I went back to brushing my teeth. That's the part I keep coming back to. That I noticed, and then I just went back to brushing my teeth. His name was Ethan. We'd been together 4 years, engaged for 8 months. We lived in a 2-bedroom condo in Austin that I'd bought 2 years before I even met him, and he'd moved in 14 months ago with 3 boxes of clothes, a record player, and about 45% of the enthusiasm I'd expected. I was 31. I was a project manager at a mid-size architecture firm. I had a 401k and a standing Saturday morning yoga class and a very clear picture of what the next 5 years of my life was supposed to look like. That picture had Ethan in it. He was smart in the way that made you feel smarter just by being around him. He remembered things, not just your coffee order, but the name of your 3rd-grade teacher you'd mentioned once. He laughed at things that were actually funny and not just things that were supposed to be funny. When we first started dating, he'd leave little notes in my work bag. Sticky notes with bad drawings of our inside jokes. I still have a few of them in the back of a drawer somewhere. I haven't thrown them out. I'm not sure why. The first year was good. The second year was good with some friction. The third year was where I should have started paying closer attention. He stopped asking about my work. Not in a dramatic way, just gradually, the way a song fades out. One week he'd ask fewer questions. The next week a little fewer. By month 32 or so, I'd come home and say, "We finally got sign-off on the Riverside project." And he'd say, "Nice," and go back to whatever he was watching. I told myself he was tired. I told myself I was tired. I told myself that this is what long-term relationships look like. Comfortable, not electric. I told myself a lot of things. He started going to the gym later. I thought that was good at first. He'd been stressed, needed an outlet. Then I noticed the gym visits happened to coincide with the times I was in work halls or late at the office. When I was home and available, he found other things to do. Errands, long drives. Just needed to clear my head. I mentioned it once, lightly. He said I was being paranoid. I believed him, or I wanted to. We got engaged on a trip to Santa Fe. It was my idea, honestly. I'd booked the trip, found the restaurant, practically drawn him a map. He proposed over dinner and it was beautiful, and I was so relieved that I cried. I think I was mostly relieved. Looking back, I wonder how much of my happiness that night was love and how much was the feeling that the thing I'd been working so hard to hold together was finally officially secured. The wedding planning started that December. His involvement was close to zero. I don't mean he was unhelpful. I mean he was absent in a way that required active effort. I'd ask him to look at venue options and he'd say he would, and then he wouldn't. I'd make decisions and tell him afterward, and he'd say, "Sounds good." I booked the venue, a restored ranch outside of Dripping Springs that I'd been in love with since I found it, and sent him the confirmation email, and he liked the email, like as in the little thumbs up reaction. He reacted to our wedding venue confirmation with a thumbs up emoji. My friend Cecile told me he was checked out. She said it more diplomatically than that, but that's what she meant. We were at brunch in early February, and she was watching me go through the venue's linen options on my phone, while Ethan was theoretically running a quick errand, and she put her hand on my wrist and said, "Nora, he's not in this with you." I told her she didn't know him the way I did. She let it go. She's a good friend. She let it go, and she stayed at brunch with me for another 2 hours while I narrowed the linens down to ivory or champagne, and she acted like she wasn't watching me plan a wedding by myself. I chose champagne. I still think it was the right call. March came. I had paid the venue, deposit, $4,200, booked the caterer, put down a deposit on a photographer I'd spent 3 weeks researching. I was doing all of this on my lunch breaks and on weekend mornings while Ethan slept in. He had been between jobs since November. He was taking time to figure out his next move. I didn't push. I told myself this was what being a supportive partner looked like. I was 3 weeks into finalizing the florist when I found the texts. I wasn't looking for them. His phone buzzed while he was in the shower, and I glanced over out of habit, the way you do when a phone lights up near you. The notification was from a name I didn't recognize, a woman's name, and the preview said "miss you already" and then cut off. I put the phone down. I stood there. I looked at my own hands. Then I heard the shower turn off, and I walked to the kitchen and I made coffee. And I poured him a mug and I put it on the counter and I didn't say a single word. I am still not entirely sure how I did that. I think my body made a decision before my brain caught up. He came out. He saw the coffee. He said thanks. He picked up his phone. I watched his shoulders do something small, a tiny shift, a micro adjustment, and I knew. I already knew, but now my body knew, and the two pieces of information met somewhere in my chest and just sat there. I didn't confront him that day. I know that sounds strange, but I needed to think, and I knew that if I opened my mouth in that moment, whatever came out would be operating on pure shock, and I didn't want to do that. I'd worked too hard, paid too many deposits, and built too much of my life thoughtfully to blow it up with a conversation I wasn't ready to have. So I went to work. I sat in a meeting about the new mixed-use development on East 6th, and I contributed 3 good ideas, and I did not cry. That night I called Cecile. I told her what I'd seen. She didn't say "I told you so." She said, "Okay, what do you want to do?" I said I didn't know yet. She said, "You don't have to know tonight." I didn't know for about 10 more days. I went through the normal motions: work, dinner, conversations about nothing. One Sunday where we actually had a nice afternoon, and I almost convinced myself I'd misread the whole thing. Then he left his laptop open on the kitchen island, and I walked past and saw a conversation thread that confirmed what I already knew, and then some. Her name was Adrian. They'd been talking since October. October. I'd booked the venue in November. I sat down on the kitchen floor, not dramatically. I just sort of lowered myself down with my back against the cabinet because I needed to be on the floor for a minute. The tile was cold, I noticed that. I sat there until I stopped shaking, and then I got up and I went and took a shower, and I thought very clearly about what I wanted the next chapter of my life to look like. When he got home that night, I was calm. I had decided to be calm. I had decided to be calm. I had decided that he was not going to watch me fall apart. I had decided that whatever happened in the next 30 minutes, he would not walk away thinking that he had broken me. I made us both dinner. Pasta with this lemon cream sauce I'd been making for years. We sat down and I let him talk for a few minutes about some friend of his, about something he'd read, and then I said his name and he stopped. I said, "I know about Adrian." The color left his face. I watched it go, like something draining out. He started talking. I listened. He said things. That it had started as nothing, that he didn't know how it happened, that he was confused, that he loved me, that he was sorry. He said sorry probably 5 times in the first 3 minutes. He said he wanted to fix it. I let him finish. Then I said, "I'm going to need you to move out." Quietly. No shaking. No tears. I surprised myself. He said, "Nora, please." I said, "I'll give you this week to get your things together. I'll stay at Cecile's if you need the space to pack." He looked at me like I was someone he didn't recognize. I understood that because I felt the same way. I was meeting a version of myself I hadn't known existed until about 48 hours earlier. He said he was willing to go to couples counseling. He said this wasn't something he couldn't fix. He said he didn't want to lose me. I said, "I know." And I meant it. I believed him. I think he really didn't want to lose me. I just also think he'd spent the better part of a year making choices that prioritized what he wanted in the short term over what we were trying to build together. Wanting to keep something and taking care of it are not the same thing. I was done confusing the two. He moved out on a Thursday. He took the record player. He left a box of things he thought were mine that were actually his, which I think says something about the state of mind he was in. I labeled the box and left it with the building manager for him to pick up. I called the venue the following Monday. I explained the situation and asked about the cancellation policy. They were kinder than I expected. I lost the deposit, which was painful. $4,200 is not nothing, but my attorney, yes, I got an attorney, because Cecile told me to, and Cecile is almost always right, helped me understand what I might be able to recover depending on how certain expenses had been shared. Ethan had contributed to exactly zero of the wedding costs, which was useful information to have on record. I'm not going to walk you through the legal specifics. What I will tell you is that by May, I had documentation of every dollar I'd spent, a very clear picture of what was and wasn't recoverable, and a signed letter from Ethan acknowledging his contribution to the breakdown of our engagement. My attorney suggested that, and I thought it was excessive until I realized it wasn't. The weeks after he left were strange, not terrible. Strange. The condo felt different. Larger, quieter, mine again in a way it had sort of stopped feeling. I rearranged the living room. I put his old side of the closet to use for things I'd been storing in the hallway. I bought myself flowers on a Tuesday for no reason and put them on the kitchen island where his laptop used to be. I cried sometimes. I want to be honest about that. I cried in the shower and occasionally in my car, and once, humiliatingly, in the middle of a work call that I managed to mute myself for before anything audible happened. Grief doesn't have a schedule. I gave myself permission to feel it when it came and to not perform okayness when I wasn't. But I was also, underneath the grief, genuinely okay. That part surprised me. I'd expected the kind of devastation that takes you out. What I got instead was something closer to clarity. Like a window that had been clouded for a long time, had finally been cleaned, and now I could see through it, not easily, not painlessly, but clearly. I started saying yes to things I'd been putting off. A weekend trip with Cecile and 2 other friends to the Texas Hill Country. A cooking class I'd bookmarked for 2 years. Volunteering with a non-profit that rehabilitates old buildings. An obvious choice given my work, but one I'd never made time for. 3 months after Ethan moved out, I was promoted to senior project manager. It wasn't directly related to the breakup, but it didn't feel unrelated either. I'd been pouring a significant amount of my energy into managing a relationship that was slowly losing pressure, and when that stopped, something went somewhere else. I was in the office late on a Wednesday when I met someone. His name is Jonah. He's an engineer, one of the structural consultants we brought in on the E6 project. We'd been in the same meetings for months, and the timing had never been right for anything beyond professional courtesy. That Wednesday, we both happened to be the last 2 people in the building, and we ended up walking to the parking garage together, and then talking in the parking garage for an hour and 20 minutes, which neither of us planned. I'm not telling you we rode off into the sunset. We didn't. What I'm telling you is that for the first time in years, I had a conversation with someone where I felt like both people were equally present, where nobody was managing distance, where I didn't have to read anything. We started spending time together, slowly. I wasn't ready to rush into anything, and I told him that, and he said he wasn't in a rush either, and we both meant it. It was so different I didn't have a frame of reference for it at first. I heard from Ethan in September. He sent a text. It said he'd been doing a lot of thinking, that he'd been in therapy, that he understood now what he'd done and how badly he'd handled things, and that he knew he had no right to ask for anything, but he missed me and he wanted me to know that. I read it twice. Then I put my phone down and I went back to the project proposal I'd been working on. I didn't respond that night, or the following day. On the 3rd day, I sent back 3 sentences. I said I was glad he was getting support. I said I hoped he was doing well. I said I wished him the best and meant it. He wrote back immediately. He said he wanted to talk. He said he thought maybe we'd given up too quickly. He said he was different now. I thought about that for a long time, not because I was tempted. I want to be clear about that. I thought about it because I was genuinely curious about what I would have said to that 12 months earlier. 12 months earlier, I think I would have said, okay, let's try. I think I would have taken the opening and run with it. I would have told myself that people change and that what we had was worth fighting for, and I would have organized the reconciliation the same way I'd organized the wedding, enthusiastically, largely alone. I didn't write back. He sent 2 more messages over the following 3 weeks. I read them and I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty. I thought about it honestly and I decided that he had gotten from me everything I had to give and that what he was offering now was a return on an investment I was no longer making. Cecile, when I told her, said you've changed. I thought about that. I said, I think I've just stopped performing someone else's idea of who I should be. She nodded. She said, yeah. That. I turned 33 in a few months. The condo is mine. The promotion is mine. The promotion is mine. The Saturday yoga class is mine, and I finally switched to the 8 a.m. slot, which I'd been wanting to do for 2 years and hadn't because Ethan liked to sleep in, and I didn't want to disturb him. I disturb no one now. I don't have the wedding I planned. I have the $4,200 deposit I lost, and I have the dress I bought and haven't returned, and I have a handful of vendor relationships that are now just awkward when they come up in professional contexts. I have all of that. I also have this. I know in a way I couldn't have known before exactly what I'm worth and exactly what I'm willing to accept. Not in the bumper sticker version of that, not the quote you put on a canvas. In the real version, the lived version. The version where you sit on a cold tile floor for 6 minutes after your whole life rearranges itself, and then you stand up and you make dinner, and you look the person across from you in the eye and you say the true thing. That version. Jonah asked me recently what I would do differently if I could go back. I had to think about it for a real minute. I said I would have paid attention to what I noticed earlier, not even acted differently, just stopped dismissing the things I was noticing. The phone on the chest, the thumbs up emoji, the errand runs that happened to fall when I was home. I noticed all of it. I just kept filing it, working on it, instead of looking at what I was actually seeing. He asked what made me start seeing clearly. I said, I stopped waiting for evidence that something was wrong and started accepting what was already in front of me. He thought about that, then he said, I'm glad you made it out. I said, me too. And I was. I am. Some things end exactly when they're supposed to, even if the timing is terrible, even if the deposits are non-refundable, even if you already chose the champagne linens. Some exits are gifts wearing bad disguises. I'm still not sure I'd call what Ethan did a gift, but I will say this. The life I have now, the one I've been building since that Thursday he left with the record player, this one feels like mine. Fully mine. Not a compromise. Not a construction project with one person doing all the labor. Just mine. And that's something I didn't know I'd been missing until I had it back. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this happened. Not in any cosmic or religious sense, just the plain, observable kind. The kind where you look back at a sequence of events and you see with uncomfortable clarity how each choice built the next one. Ethan made choices, small ones first. He chose to keep his phone face down. He chose to leave for the gym when I was home and come back when I wasn't. He chose to react to our wedding venue confirmation with a thumbs up emoji and think that was enough. None of those were accidents. Each one was a decision made in the direction of distance, and they accumulated the way quiet things do, until the weight became impossible to ignore. And I made choices too. I chose to notice things and then file them away. I chose to call it tiredness, to call it adjustment, to call it the natural settling of a long relationship. I am not saying I deserved what happened. I'm saying I participated in the conditions that allowed it to continue longer than it should have. That's a hard thing to sit with, and I've had to sit with it honestly. What I understand now, what Nora at 31 could not have told you, is that intelligence without honesty is just a very elaborate way of lying to yourself. I am good at my job. I solve complicated problems. I manage timelines and budgets and people. And I took all of that capability and used it to organize a wedding that one of the two people involved had already mentally left. That's not a failure of intelligence. That's a failure of courage. The courage to look at what's in front of you and name it, even when naming it means everything changes. I think about Cecile putting her hand on my wrist at brunch. She saw it. She said it carefully. And I told her she didn't know him the way I did. What I meant underneath that was, I'm not ready to know this yet. Wisdom isn't just having good instincts, it's being willing to act on them before the damage is done. She had that. I was still building it. The 6 minutes I spent on the kitchen floor after I saw that laptop screen. I think about those 6 minutes a lot, not as a low point, but as a turning point. Because I got up, I didn't stay down, I didn't call him, I didn't spiral, I didn't go looking for a way to unsee what I'd seen. I got up, I took a shower, I thought clearly, and I made a decision about who I was going to be on the other side of this. That was not a small thing. That was everything. Resilience isn't the absence of impact. It's what you decide to do with the 6 minutes after the floor. The version of me who made Ethan coffee that morning, who sat across from him at dinner and said his name and said the true thing, she didn't appear out of nowhere. She was built from every hard conversation I'd ever had, every time I'd chosen honesty when it was uncomfortable, every time I'd respected myself enough to act like my own well-being mattered. That's not dramatic, it's just the slow accumulation of good choices, meeting a moment that required them. And Ethan, with his September text, with his "I've changed," I think we gave up too quickly. I believe he meant it. I also know that people don't change direction until the conditions that allowed them to stay comfortable are removed. I removed those conditions. That was, in the end, the most useful thing I could do for both of us. I don't need him to have been a villain. I just needed to stop being a supporting character in my own story. That's what I know now. That's what I carry forward.